Hello, my name is Kai, and I am a bit of a rambler. I like to travel, learn, and tell stories. And today I'm going to ramble on a bit. What else has been happening in Cusco since we last talked? Well, I found a bunch of internet cafes. And internet cafes were a thing in China while I was living there. But they've rapidly declined in popularity as tech has become so ubiquitous in China. And you only see them in very, very poor countries these days because everybody has a cell phone. Even if you're super, super poor, you can get a working smartphone that most people can play games on. But these internet cafes are still pretty popular. I see people going into them pretty regularly. There was a sign for Lego Fortnite, and I guess it's a thing. So there are still one of them said LAN Cafe or something like that. That was really cool. So yeah, there are a bunch of internet cafes in my neighborhood, and they are still frequented. So the world hasn't completely moved on. They're not completely wireless yet. They still have LAN cafes around Cusco. Okay, crazy ass dogs. Dogs get angry at me. They've been nice ever since I met a nice dog in in Panama. That dog made other dogs like me again. He imbued me with some sort of puppy spirit, and it was cool because dogs didn't bark at me as much anymore. And then I wanted to go to the Incan ruins because Cusco is amazing. There are Incan ruins around the city within easy walking distance. So after a week here, I was like, I gotta go check out these ruins. And they were as cool as I hoped that they were going to be. They were cooler. I was really overwhelmed, flabbergasted, jaw-dropped seeing these ruins. And they weren't particularly intricate, but just looking at the walls and how well the stones fit together boggled my mind. It was so cool going to these places. But on the hike up there, these dogs went total nutballs on me. And I was going up there in the morning too. The dogs are pretty docile during the day, but during less popular times of the day, like really early morning, really late night, or during the night, the dogs bark and are more aggressive. So I was walking up through sort of remote neighborhoods so that I could make my way. I was just following trails on my offline map, which led me through neighborhoods, up through a forest, and then I could get to these archaeological sites, these Incan ruins that I really wanted to see because of those walls. Did not disappoint. But on the way, small, twisty roads and dusty old buildings and dogs not used to seeing a lot of people, and no dogs are on leashes in this city. They just don't do leashes here. So they started barking at me, and I was like, oh no, my Panama puppy spirit is waning. And the dogs were angry, but I remembered reading in a guidebook that if you pick up something, and I always have a dog whacking stick, or I did in Thailand, and if you pick up a stick, dogs will stay away. And I just did that here. I picked up a stick or a rock and just holding something, and then the dogs leave you alone. They might bark, but they're not going to attack because you're holding something. And I was walking up to a mountain with one of the 7 Vitas so I could take a beer picture. There's this community on Lemmy called Beer with a View, and I was going to take a picture of me holding the beer on the mountain, which is what we do in that community because we're weirdos. And a local saw me walking and saw a dog barking at me, and he just leaned down, picked up a rock, and showed it to the dog, and the dog shut up and just walked away calmly. Like, oh, okay, fine. But if you're a local, they won't bark at you. But if you are not local, the dogs can smell it or see it, whatever it is, and they are very loud and barking at me for being a foreigner. That's very common in a lot of countries. Dogs know if you ain't from there, and they're rude about it. The hostess insisted on coming up to the apartment to talk to me. I think she wants to practice English, I'm not sure, but she always tries to get inside the apartment. So after I moved in, after I was here for a week, she insisted she said she had something to give me or something. It was all in Spanish, and I was like, yeah, okay. And she came up, and she didn't have anything to give me, but she did tell me about all these things about the neighborhood that I had already figured out after a week, because I'm very, exploration oriented. I walk around the city, I find the restaurants right away, I figure out how the transportation works, the markets, all that kind of stuff. But many travelers are not as bold. No, that's too complimentary for me, right? Many travelers don't self-directed. They are not as self-directed as I am. And I assume that's what she thought, because instead of asking me if I knew any of this stuff, she just explained where the market was, which I had already found, where the supermarkets were that I already found, how to take the bus, which I know, just a whole bunch of stuff that I was already aware of. She seems nice, though. She's just busy. Her nose is sticking into my business. But I'm also very sensitive to that. I like to do everything self-directed. And so I'm probably more sensitive to that than she's actually being a pain in the butt, because she's done it a few times, but she gets the picture and stays away after a little while. Okay, let's talk about my water filter, because it's frickin' awesome. I'll do the archaeology sites, the Incan ruins all at one time. But at those Incan sites, there was a bunch of fire, campfires that had burned out. And when I saw that, I was like, ooh, activated carbon. So if you burn wood at a fairly low heat, like a regular heat, like a campfire does, you'll have activated carbon at the end of it. And that has an enormous surface area, because the activated carbon, after wood burns, it becomes so porous. So there's just holes going through every little piece. Every powder piece of this has a absurd amount of holes. Thousands of holes on each little thing, and divots and holes. So instead of a ball, which would have a low surface area, this is a cratered sphere, which has an immense surface area. Every time you have a new crater, you have extra surface area. 1 gram of activated carbon is 3,000 meters squared, which is 32,000 square feet. So 1 gram, that's like a pinch of activated carbon, is 32,000 square feet of surface area. So it's a very effective filter. So when I saw these campfires around the Incan ruins, I was like, man, I still have not made a water filter. They don't have a water filter in my apartment. They do have a kettle, but you can taste that there are still minerals and metals and stuff in the water, even after it's treated, because there are treatment plants all around Cusco, water treatment plants. So I took some activated carbon, like some burnt branches, and I brought them home, and I crushed them up with the ends of the chopsticks that I have. I just and crushed them slowly up in a bowl. And then I put a layer of cotton on the bottom I cut off the bottom of a bottle. I heated up the tip of something, maybe a knife, or it was really small. It was some kind of pokey thing. And then poked a little hole in the cap of the bottle, cut off the bottom of the bottle, put some cotton on the bottom as like a regular filter, put an inch of activated carbon, like powdered activated carbon, on top of that cotton. And that is a basic filter, because the activated carbon is going to do most of the filtering. So I poured some water in, and because I didn't have anything holding the carbon down, it just became this huge black cloud of activated carbon mixed with water. And I was like, ooh, did I do this wrong? But as it drained out, all the activated carbon, most of it went down with the water level. Some stayed on the sides of the bottle. But the water that came out was perfectly clear, and it tasted way better right away. So I was like, holy crap, it works. And I was so happy with that, because the water didn't taste perfect, but it tasted much cleaner, much more pleasant, much more pure, watery than it had before. So I was very excited about that. I used it for a few days before I was like, okay, this works so good, I should just put in more activated carbon and make this a better filter. So I went back to the sites. I got way too much activated carbon. I filled most of the backpack with activated carbon, and when I got home, I was like, oh, I took so much. This is crazy. But it's just leftover burnt wood from a campfire, so it's not like anyone's going to miss it. It was just, I don't need that much. And I also realized that I have a blender. So instead of crushing it with the chopsticks myself very slowly, I just threw a couple chunks in the blender and blended them for a few seconds, and I had all the powdered activated carbon I needed. So I got a bunch of that in like 10 minutes of processing the activated carbon into powder. I poured 2 hefty inches, maybe 2.5, 3 inches more of activated carbon onto the first layer. Oh, I put on 1 extra layer of cotton. So now I have cotton, 1 inch of activated carbon, cotton, 2+ inches of activated carbon powder. And then I put on 1 more piece of cotton, and then I sterilized a handful of pebbles that I had picked up off the side of the road. I just boiled them in water for a few minutes. And then I put those on top of the cotton to hold the cotton down. So now when I pour in the water, it doesn't mix with the activated carbon and make a mess all around the bottle. It just acts like a regular filter. I pour it over the rocks. It filters through cotton, activated carbon, cotton, comes out. I'm not going to say pure, but it tastes it tastes as good as water filtered through a Brita filter would taste. It tastes very filtered, very pure water. So the extra 2 inches of activated carbon made a significant difference. If I had a bigger pitcher, because right now I put this upside down bottle in the mouth of a pitcher and then pour boiled and cooled down water into it, and then the water is filtered down into that pitcher, which I can then pour into my glass. If I had a larger pitcher, then I would probably use a 2-liter bottle and just see how pure I could get it with this activated carbon, because I have so much and it makes such a difference. It's really interesting. But anyway, it works great, and I have this great water filter that, just like the bottle bidet I'm using, I can make a new one every single place I go, because there's always a campfire somewhere. Someone has always burned wood somewhere, and all I need is like a fist-sized piece of wood, and that's plenty to start with this basic filter. So yeah, anywhere I go from now on, I've been living with, that's okay, the water has been treated, I boil it, let it cool down, tastes a little smooth or minerally or whatever, but now I know I can just get any little water bottle, cut off the bottom of it, some cotton, activated carbon, and I have tasty, pure water again. So I'm very excited about this because it was very easy to make. I checked everything before I made just to make sure I understood the science correctly, and yes, it is just activated carbon will do this. And it was a resounding success. The water tastes so much improved and so delicious after using it. I cannot recommend it enough. If you need a water filter and don't want to spend $30 on a Brita, just get one of these. They work great. I'm very confused how the Sawyer filters work, because they're rated for up to 100,000 liters. They're these Sawyer mini filters, and I can't imagine how you can filter that many. They must not use activated carbon, I don't know. But anyway, my homemade filter works. I'm going to keep using it in the future whenever I need a water filter. When I homestead and make my own house, I'm going to be making this kind of water filter. I won't be buying a Brita or other kind of water filter. I'll certainly be making my own. If I don't use this method specifically, then I'm going to be using a clay method instead. But the activated carbon works so well. I can have a campfire with friends and make a giant activated carbon water filter that will last for months or a year, depending on the size. Okay, what other cool stuff has been going on? Pizzas. So Cusco really likes pizzas. There's pizzas all around the city, like regular restaurants, and then there's also street pizzas, which only cost $1.50. They're very cheap, maybe $2 at the most. And it's a little personal pan pizza, but they actually make them in little wood-fired pizza ovens. So you order a pizza. They usually have a few different kinds. They have sweet pizzas here also, which I haven't gotten yet. I'm probably not going to. I usually get the savory one. But you can order meat pizza or ham pizza, ham and cheese. And they'll pull out this tiny little pizza that's that's pre-made. That they made, I mean. They don't buy it from somewhere. And then they have a little igloo-shaped wood-fired pizza oven on the cart. And they have a real, like, pizza spatula, and they pick up the little pizza and put it in the oven. They spin it around a couple times, and then after a few minutes, you have this authentic pizza oven pizza coming out for $2. And it's not like the best thing ever, but it's better than a lot of pizzas in other countries I've had because it's made in a real pizza oven. So the cheese is browned and the bottom is a little blackened. It's really good. It's tasty pizzas. I've got a few of them already. And it's just really cool seeing the miniature authentic pizza ovens too. And they're all made out of clay, so they have like cracks going through them and stuff because they've been used for years. They're just really cool. I like all the street food here a lot. And I was so delighted when I saw the first pizza oven that I immediately got a pizza. And then I noticed around me, there's a lot of these little pizza ovens that people cart around and make pizza in. So good on you, cool pizza makers in Cusco. Oh, and this is funny. At the supermarket, my favorite supermarket here is called La Canasta. And actually, my favorite La Canasta, because there are a few in the city, is the one down the street from me, like a 20-minute walk or something, because I guess because it's further out of the city. I actually don't understand why, but they generally have better produce and better everything at this one store that I like to go to. And I go there fairly frequently, like every other day, because I'm always getting fresh food to make my vegetable dip that I eat with potato chips, or those smoked ribs. I will eat those a lot. But I've noticed I used to listen to podcasts walking around while I was shopping, and then I heard this good song playing on the radio, so I took off my headphones while I was walking around the store, and then I was like, oh, the next song's good too. Oh, so is the next one. And I realized I like the music at this supermarket. I don't know if it's the equivalent of like pop garbage like in the States, just like really boring generic songs, but I like all the music they play at this one supermarket. So it's kind of fun going on each trip because when I get in there, I'm not blocking myself off from the world by listening to my headphones, which is what I'm usually doing. I'm usually listening to a podcast or my own music. I'm just shopping with everybody else, listening to like pew 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 pew, like these regular Spanish-speaking Peruvian pop songs. It's a lot of fun, liking the supermarket music for a change. Not a common experience for me. Okay, Incan ruins. Let's talk about Incan ruins, because I went to the Incan ruins. They're crazy. So I had 20 different sites or so marked around Cusco to go to, and there's one very popular touristy one called Sacsayhuaman, which I probably will still go to because it's in Cusco. But it's touristy. I didn't want to go there right away. It's not super close to me. And there are closer archaeological sites. So I walked to them. The dogs barked at me, but I still walked to each place. And when I get to a place, I mark it on my map, and then I remove it from my map after I reach that place and I see what it is. So I had 20, and by the end of the first morning, I had gone through like 7 or 8 of them. And they were mostly just empty grass lots with maybe a wall somewhere, but usually not, just an empty grass field that I couldn't tell anything from. But they were being kept empty, so I guess they were archaeological sites. Maybe some pottery was found there. There wasn't a lot to see, but I just kept going because I do this in every country, and I mark all the things and then remove them from the map as I check them out. And eventually, I usually find something pretty cool. And after, 7 or 8 of them, the next one, I had to climb up a different mountain 20 minutes away, and I started going through this insane forest of like spearmint trees that are called caijito, according to a local. That might be the Quechua word, because I still don't know what kind of tree that is. This thing said it was a eucalyptus blue gum, some plant identifier app that I tried, but they smell super strong, like Altoid wintergreen mints. From literally hundreds of feet away, I could smell them. And what's really interesting is the smell didn't get much stronger as I got closer to the trees. It was just like whatever their scent was could carry very far distances. So I could smell it from 100 feet away, And if I was standing next to them, I could smell them, but it didn't become overpowering. It was just that same very nice wintergreen smell. And because it smelled so nice, I took a leaf off and bit it and chewed into it. And if I chewed it too much, it became pretty bitter. But if I just chewed it a couple times and then spit it out, I had this wintergreen taste in my mouth, just like an Altoid. It was very bizarre. And I still am curious about what kind of trees exactly those are. Cajito. The guy said it, cajito, like that. But I don't know. I couldn't find it. I'll still look later, probably, but I'm happy just knowing they're there because I saw one and I just smelled this one tree from 100 feet away. And when I got to it, I was like, oh my gosh, I think it's this thing with these silvery green looking leaves. And it looked so cool. I was really into it. And also I found out, okay, I'll tell that in a minute. So they smell super strong. I chewed one. I found the first one and I was like, wow, that's an amazing tree. But it was on the way, but I had to continue down the path. So I kept going. And then I came across like 10 of them in a bunch. And I was so excited. And there was a path that led to the first Incan ruins I was going to. And that path was blocked. So I doubled back and took a different path. And that path ended up leading me through like a grove of these spearmint trees. And I got to walk through like 30 of them or 100 of them. I don't know. There was a bunch because I couldn't see. They were so thickly grown together. And the path weaved through this Narnia forest of spearmint trees that smelled so good. It was so cool. And it was like not a long part of the walk, but for a series of the path, for a segment of it, I got to walk through the spearmint forest. And I was so happy. It smelled the best. It looked the coolest. They're very cool looking trees. Broad-ish leaves, but a silvery green. The green leaves are covered with the silvery powder. I don't know. It was amazing. And I checked. They're not coca trees. They're not cocaina. Okay, and then after that, I was like so happy. And I exited the forest and this whole mountainside of them. Actually, that's not true. So I exited the forest area and then I had to walk for like 20 minutes. And then all of a sudden, I smelled all of those spearmint trees again. And I looked up and a side of a mountain hundreds of feet away was covered in these trees and I could smell them from there. And it's such an interesting smell and tree. I'm very enamored of these trees. And yeah, it smelled fantastic. And I kept down just like staring at all the trees, so happy. And that's when I found that local guy who told me he was on the way to the first Incan site I was going to. And I doubled back so I could ask him, like, what are these trees called? And he said, Calijito. Calijito? Sí, Calijito. And I was like, okay, I don't even know if he had the L in there, but it's either Cajito or Cajito, something like that. And then he said, Esto grande, like, what did he say? Esto grande es un Cajito. And he was pointing to one of the giant trees. So I was asked about these little silver green trees that are about the size of any human. And then he was pointing at this huge tree that was maybe 100 feet high. They have really big trees here. And I was like, oh no, I'm curious about those little ones. He's like, sí, esto también. And so that's how I found out those giant trees was what those little spearmint trees grew into. Because I saw one of the giant trees and they had a silvery leaf coming out of it, like a little sprig of maybe 20 leaves on a tiny developing branch coming out of it. And I was like, that's the same tree. Hey, eso es el mismo? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, holy crap. So after I said Cajito at him a bunch of times, and he was like, yeah, in the way like, no, but it's fine that you're trying. I kept on walking through this forest. And now I realized I was walking through a forest of giant spearmint trees and a whole bunch of baby spearmint trees also. Still don't know really what they are, but they're super cool trees. And then I made it to my first Incan site. And I was like, what? My first Incan site was called Rumiwasi was the first one. Rumiwasi. Rumiwasi. And that is, if you walk straight out of the city and you know where you're going, it's less than an hour's walk outside of the city to get to this place. Just walking. There's a whole bunch of paths leading to the main path leading into the archaeological site. There's a whole bunch of paths leading to the archaeological site because I took a different footpath out of the archaeological site. But, okay, it's an archaeological site. They have original Incan ruins with the original Incan stones, with doorways inside there. Like, there are some intact Incan walls. The whole town isn't intact by any measure, but there are several intact Incan walls where the stones fit perfectly together. They're like notched together, which the best theory I know of is that they use acid to shape the stones because they're all made of limestone and softer stones that do melt in acids that would have been available to Incans and other Central and South Americans at the time. And I have seen these on the internet and I've studied these things in ancient civilizations, and I'm interested in that stuff. But this was the first time seeing them in real life. And when you go to the site of Rumiwasi, when you walk onto this site of Incan ruins, you can just walk right up to them. There's no gate. There's a sign that says Rumiwasi. And then you take a step past the sign and you're on the site. You're walking on the courtyard of this Incan city, of what used to be an Incan town or city. And the walls are right there, and there's no fences or anything, and you can just walk right up to the walls and touch them, and they're totally crazy. And I think because they're not all perfect squares or rectangles, that's what's so interesting about these Incan walls. They can have 12 sides or more to one stone, and all the other stones fit angularly perfect to that stone. There was one in the shape of like a boot, and it had 9 sides, and I have a great picture of it, and all the stones around it just fit perfectly into the curve or the angle, whatever it is. All the stones fit perfectly together. Perfectly as in like you can't put a sheet of paper through there. You can't get a pin into there. They fit perfectly together. It's fascinating for me especially to see because I've always been interested in these. And until I heard about the acid theory, I was like, how the hell can anybody do this? I've never seen this in modern society, this type of masonry, anything like this. And here I am confronted face to face with this. Or no, that was just when I was looking into it. But then I found out about the acid theory. And that makes sense, seeing it up front, especially because the walls at Rumiwasi, a huge wall, has like 4 doorways leading into the wall. And inside the doorway, the rocks are not as weathered. On the outside, they feel like regular rocks, like the rock texture, like a coarse rocky. But on the inside of these doorways, the weather hasn't gotten at the rocks as much, and the inside, the original stones, are glazed. They're very smooth. They feel like a glazed tile floor. So it's insane, because that very much supports the acid theory, that they're acid finished at least, and if they were acid finished, then it makes a lot of sense that they would use acid to fit these blocks into each other. Totally crazy because again, I walked right up to it. There was no one there. There was no security guard. There were no other tourists. There was just me alone on this giant Incan site, touching the walls that I've been fascinated by for well over a decade. I've been very interested in how these stones fit together and the Egyptian ones, but I don't think this was free. I can just walk up to the site for free, hike up there through these trails outside of the city, and then I can touch the insides of these stones that are preserved hundreds of years later because they haven't been smacked around by the elements, and it feels smooth. It was so cool to visit these sites. And that was only the first one. That was Rumiwasi. That's where I saw all the activated carbon campfires around, like outside of the site. And that's where I picked up my first activated carbon, around that first site. So Rumiwasi, fascinating free site with amazing Incan walls with stones, giants. They're huge stones too. Some of them are people-sized and way thicker, so they're hundreds of pounds, 1,000 pounds, who knows? They're maybe not 1,000, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of those stones were like 800 pounds. They're huge stones, just molded perfectly into place with all the other ones. Some of them had tree roots growing out of them, and so they were starting to push the stones apart. but that's like hundreds of years of tree roots pushing through these stones. And they have earthquakes here fairly frequently. And most of the stone wall is completely intact. Like I said, you couldn't push a razor blade through. There's no room between the stones. It's amazing. It's amazing. So that was Rumiwasi. And that's when I got excited because I had been walking already for 2 hours, visited 7 sites. They all kind of sucked. And then I got to Rumiwasi and I was like, oh, there it is. See, as long as I just keep going to all the sites listed, I usually find a good one. And this, if I came to Peru and I only saw this one site and that one wall particularly, especially the one with the doors where I could feel the glazed surface of the Incan stones, I would be fine. I would be like, okay, that's everything I wanted from visiting Peru. But I visited this place and there were 2 other places titled similarly. And I was like, oh my God, maybe there's 2 other ancient ruins with intact walls that I can visit. And spoiler alert, there were 2 more. There was Hatun, which was cool, the second one. It also had walls. They were about as big. They were pretty cool. And then Wakapunku. Wakapunku was the third one. And it was pretty crazy. They had probably the most walls at Wakapunku, which I didn't know how to pronounce. And I was just like, guess it's Wakapunku. And that was the first time I saw other tourists. There was a super old grandpa and grandma walking up, and they separated, and she was going around the side, and he just climbed up this like small hill to get to this place I was standing, which, contrary to most Incan walls, was not made of many, many blocks. There were the traditional Incan walls, but they were surrounding a pretty long, like 50-foot long, one rock face, like natural rock in the cliff, like a small cliff. And then there was a cave that didn't look natural, that looked sort of carved into it. And I was staring at it. I was like, why is there a cave there? And why are these blocks around this cliff face, basically this tiny cliff face? And I was walking away just trying to figure it out in my head. And I was like, well, that old man's right there. Why don't you just ask him? And the first thing I asked him was like, hola, esta es Wakapunku? And he was like, no, Wakapunku. Wakapunku. And I was like, oh, okay, Wakapunku. And I didn't ask him anything else, but he was like, hey. He called back to me when I said thank you and turned away. And he was like, no, wait. You see that hole? And this is all in Spanish. My Spanish has been getting better, so I kind of understood what he was saying to me here. And he said, you see that hole? That is what is left of a portrait of a very large portrait of an Incan woman. That was her mouth. Right above that, where the rock comes out, that was her nose, and then her ears, and her eyes, and her hair flowed off to the side. So they made it out of a whole bunch of blocks. They made like this Incan block portrait of this woman. And then he said, but after the Spanish came, the conquistadors, and took over Inca, and Incan fell, they took away piece by piece her face. So until her entire face was removed, took away her ears and her nose and her eyes and her hair. But before that was the face of an Incan woman, that like in this town of Wakapunku. And I just couldn't, that was, I don't know if that's true, but that was as fascinating a story, as fascinating a thing to find out about these Incan ruins as anything else I have learned about the Incan ruins so far. Seeing the walls blew me off my feet, and then this guy, and listening to him tell me this in Spanish, like this 90-year-old telling me, it was just amazing. And he repeated it a few times. He was like, so they made her face, and then when the Incans fell, they took apart piece by piece her eyes, her nose, her hair. But that is the mouth of the Incan woman that used to, be at the front of this village or town, whatever. How crazy is that? And you can walk right up to it. You can go inside the cave if you want to. It's very tiny, but I didn't. That seemed extremely rude, especially with this grandpa here who just told me this amazing story. But holy crap on a cracker. I cannot recommend Cusco enough. If you care at all about archaeology or anthropology, these Incan ruins, also very important, free, and right outside the city, like accessible for maybe an hour's hike. And most of that, like half of that's walking through city neighborhoods. You're only hiking for like half an hour outside of the actual city limits. Right there, and you can touch them. You can be right there with the history that has been there for more than half a millennium, perfectly fitting together. Just amazing. Really amazing to see. More amazing to touch. Super amazing to talk to this old man who has legends that he'll freely share with someone who's interested and in listening to him. And I thanked him so much, and he was super cool. And he was like, okay, have a good rest of your day. Nice talking, whatever. And it was a fascinating experience. So seriously, if I just saw that one wall of Rumi Wasi, I would have been sold. But now I'm like, I'm staying here an extra month in Cusco. I've already decided. I'm going to go to those ruins again. I'm going to go to other ruins for sure. Maybe Pisac. Probably not Machu Picchu. But I'm riding on this. That's the most intact archaeological site I've been to outside of Angkor Wat in Cambodia, which is absurd. That is a nearly intact palace. Like, it's crazy how intact Angkor Wat is. But even Angkor Wat, their walls are not as precise, and each stone isn't as massive as the ones in these Incan walls. Amazing. I really want to experiment with acid and limestone and see if I can make an Incan wall. I have looked for experiments of this. I can't believe nobody has experimented with this yet, because it's fascinating and the theories are out there and there's YouTube videos talking about, but I haven't seen anyone actually experimenting with acid and limestone walls yet. I want to do that. I got to get a homestead, and then I'll be doing that. Well, thank you so much for listening to this. I know I got really excited about everything, but this is a very exciting city for me. To visit such history so easily and accessibly and so close to me, and then I can return and get a pizza or like get great local stir-fried beef or whatever. It's just a dream come true for me as a traveler, and the way I like to travel and the way I like to independently, self-directedly explore these places. And I bet like I said, there were no other tourists. So I feel special visiting these places because I don't think other people go. I saw a couple other people at the third place at Wakapunku, but less than 10 people. And when they were visiting, none of them were tourists. They were all local people speaking in Quechua or Spanish. And they were just visiting it because it's a important historical site to them. But these are all down near my neck of the woods. I'm living outside of the tourist part of Cusco, east in San Sebastian. So if you do come here, live near San Sebastian, or you don't need to. You can live in the touristy part. It's fine. Even from there, it's like the same amount. It's an hour walk to these amazing, amazing sites. If you like archaeology, history, anthropology, Cusco is the place to go. I almost didn't come to Peru, but it seemed crazy not to visit while I was here. And I don't know, when I heard Cusco, I visited Cusco, you know what it was? Because of the elevation, because it's the highest city I've ever lived in, and it's one of the highest cities in human civilization, human history. Not many more cities are higher than 11,500 feet. And I was curious about the elevation. And then when I landed in Peru, I was like, oh wait, is this like the Incans? Which I'm, like I said, very interested in. And then I checked and I saw the archaeological sites on my offline map, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can go see, maybe I'll be able to see a wall or something. And wildest expectations surpassed already. And apparently I'm at the boring ruins. Sacsayhuaman's supposed to be better and more developed. And then Machu Picchu, of course. Machu Picchu just too touristy. I don't think I'm going to go there. But I'm so happy to be living in Cusco right now, and I love the climate. I'm so happy to be cold again. I've been in tropical climates for too long. I've been hot for too long. I'm very comfortable in this city. This is a great city. I highly recommend it. The people are cool. The food is great. You can contact me at bitofarambler@gmail.com or bitofarambler on Blue Sky and Lemmy. It's been awesome talking to you. Hope you have a great rest of your day. I will talk to you again next week, or in a couple days, actually. Have a great rest of your day.